So I think we're ready to get started. I guess I just want to welcome everybody to this session on cars, computing, and the future of work. And this is a collaboration between Microsoft and our UW team, which actually includes more than the UW, but it includes Harvard, Wellesley, University of New Hampshire, as well as the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and we'll be introducing everybody in a second. I'm going to actually have Ed give some logistics first, and then me and Eric will get started on the program.
Excellent. Well, thank you all very much for coming today. We're extremely excited to have you here. We have a great program with lots of new research, slides, video, everything. But the most important part of today is going to be the discussion and collaboration that we have. So we're very excited to have you working on the papers on your tables. We're going to be brainstorming together, and we're fortunate to have some good friends from Urban Wild Studios who are going to do graphic note-taking throughout the day. So this is going to be very dynamic. We will ask, because we're recording it and we have a couple collaborators on the phone, if you have questions, we'll bring you a mic. And I think it's going to be a wonderful day. You know where the coffee is, so please caffeinate accordingly. And I think we'll just get started.
Okay, great.
Please.
Thank you very much, Ed. Okay, so just want to give everybody just an overview of what the agenda is. So we're going to start off in the morning with just welcomes and introductions. So we'll do all introductions about everybody in just a second. We're going to have an overview of 4 topics, basically on ongoing projects. This is going to include Shamsi and Eric, Andrew, Orit, and Rafaela, who is on the phone, as well as Satish. And then what we ask you to do while they're talking, so the talks are only going to be 10 minutes, and I'm going to be a major downer by basically clocking people. But what we really want to do is make sure we open it up for discussions for everybody. So we're going to give you 10 minutes for discussions. And what we'd like you to do is, as you're asking questions and thinking about ideas, you have Post-its and notepads on the table, as well as pens. And what we'd like you to do is just write out your ideas. And then as you write up your ideas, you'll see that there's actually white papers along the board. Go ahead and pick it up and stick it on there. And then John Lee is going to be our runner for the morning. And he's going to go around and take a look at what those ideas are and then try to consolidate it. So that we have a 20-minute break. During that 20-minute break, we're going to actually go through and try to get you guys into groups for right after the break. So we're going to put you into 4 groups and basically discuss some of the topics that we went over. And then right after that, we will have, a follow-up and then lunch. And then in the afternoon, we're going to do it again. But instead of talking about ongoing projects, we're going to talk more about just theoretically, like where should the future of work be in cars and what we should be going. So we'll have 4 additional talks in the afternoon. And then, again, we're going to ask you to do the same exercise. Then we'll have a break. And then we're going to, again, have the discussions and then kind of wrap up and tell you what our next steps are. So hopefully that will be something that you'll enjoy doing. So what we'd like to do is just kind of get to know who everybody is. So we wanted to be able to do introductions. So because many of us are academics and we tend to talk really long, I'm trying to keep you to like something really short, which is I'm going to ask you to, number 1, say what your name is, where you're from, and then in the future, what you hope to do while you're traveling in the cars. So for example, I'll get started. Hi, my name is Linda Boyle. I'm from the University of Washington. And in the future, I hope to be able to not be motion sickness while I work on a lot of stuff in my car. Eric, would you like to go next? And then we'll go around the room.
Yes. No one has microphones. We shouldn't use microphones.
You won't get the recording. You won't get the recording without the mic.
Oh, pass the mic around me? Okay, got it. Okay, then I'll use the mic. I want to just be very fair. My name is Eric Horvitz. I am from Kirkland, Washington. In the future, I hope to be able to minimize distractions and drive more safely on all fronts.
And then we'll start passing around the mic. And be expedient.
Good morning. My name is Ed Doran. I'm from Microsoft Research. And in the future, I hope to talk to my digital assistant while I'm in the car.
Hi, I'm Andrew Kuhn. I'm from the University of New Hampshire. And in the future, I'd like to be able to listen to audiobooks and annotate them while I'm in the car.
Hi, I'm Orit Sher from Wellesley College. In the future, I would like to effectively rehearse my PowerPoint presentation as I'm going to this workshop.
Hi, I'm Duncan Brumby. I'm from University College London. And in the future, I'm just going to say it, go for a nap while driving.
Hi, I'm Shamsi Iqbal. I'm from Microsoft Research. In the future, I hope to be able to capture my thoughts while traveling in my car. And I also suffer from motion sickness, so.
Ah,
Hi, I'm Wendy Kopfer. I'm with MSR, and in the future, I'd like to have an intelligent conversation with my car, in my car.
I'm Hanan Samet. I'm with the University of Maryland. In the future, I'd like to safely doze off in my car, just as I do on the train and on the plane.
Hi, I'm Luis Lam from Brazil, Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul, which is in the south of the country. In the future, I hope to feel safer when I sleep while traveling in my car.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jacob Czekareski. I'm with the University of Alabama. Actually, don't like driving. I bike everywhere, almost everywhere. So I hope to be able to continue doing that in the future.
Hi, my name is Nikola Banovic. I'm from Ann Arbor, Michigan. In the future, I hope to spend more time with my family while traveling in the car, which we do a lot.
Hi, my name is Jessie Yang. I'm from University of Michigan, Ann Arbor as well. In the future, I hope to sing karaoke in my car without being asked to take over.
My name is Jemba Mai. I'm with Microsoft's business development team. In the future, I hope not to drive while traveling in my car.
Hi, my name is Meher. I'm at the University of Washington and MSR as an intern. In the future, I want to finish writing my Kai papers on the car.
My name is Gang Luo. I'm from Harvard Medical School. In the future, I hope if I fall into sleep, I'll be safe while traveling in my car.
Hi, good morning. I'm Satish. I'm from MSR Bangalore in India. And if any of you have been in India, you know how driving there is. So in the future, I'm like him, I'm a biker too, and I hope people driving in cars, pay more respect to bikers.
I'm Alice Fern. I'm originally from the University of Arizona College of Medicine, but now in Microsoft Office. In the future, I hope to capture my thoughts while minimally working with them while traveling in the car.
Good morning. My name is Mickey Vorvorano from Microsoft Research. In the future, I hope to be less startled by drivers who push me off the road or cut off or scare me in other many ways while traveling in my car.
Yeah. My name is Jim Pinkelman. I'm from Microsoft Research Outreach. And in the future, I'd like to do anything but worry about traffic or driving, much like a train or a plane. Sleep, learn, do anything but worry about the stress of traffic.
Hi, I'm Yuan Tian from University of Virginia. So in the future, I also hope to do everything in the car, but without worrying about my privacy and safety in the future.
I'm John Lee from the University of Wisconsin, and I hope to practice mindfulness as I drive, or not drive.
That seems to be the recurring theme. I'm Travis Wilson. I'm from Microsoft Speech and Language team, and I'm going to actually second the very boring but very appealing thing. I would love to sleep while I'm traveling in my car.
My name is Ivan Tashev. I'm from Microsoft Research, and I hope to be well informed and entertained while I'm driving.
Don Norman from the University of California, San Diego. There are two futures. The near future, I hope to stop the car companies and some of the people in this room who have made very dangerous suggestions about what drivers should be doing while also driving, because I want to be able to feel safe, and not just from my own car, but from other cars that might hit me. In the very far future, I hope for driverless cars where there are no controls whatsoever, and so we can do whatever we feel like doing. Unfortunately, I'll be dead by the time that happens.
I'm Mark Sabrex. I'm from the National Science Foundation and the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. In the future, I hope to now repetitively do a whole variety of these tasks that people are mentioning because I won't have to attend to the key aspects of the driving.
My name is Albrecht Schmidt. I'm from the University of Munich in Germany, and I hope in the future I drive less and I travel less in the car. So, and while I'm in the car, I want to be safe.
Excellent.
My name is Jill. I'm from the Chicago branch of Urban Wild Studio, and I'd like to be able to look around at the scenery while I'm driving in my car.
Hi.
My name is Leah. I am from the Portland branch of Urban Wild Studio, and I would like to feel more refreshed rather than drained after a long car ride.
Okay, and last but not least, we have Rafaela online. Rafaela, can you hear us?
Yeah, sure. My name is Raffaella Sadun from Harvard Business School. I'm also Italian, so I hope that in the future I will be happy, relaxed, and productive, and not be taken by road rage in the car.
Yeah, very good. Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you very much, everybody. So this is what our workshop goals are. We're hoping that we're going to be able to share some really amazing ideas and look for challenges and opportunities where we can actually then come together to try to find some solutions so that we can work together. And so our goal is to basically identify what these potential collaborations are, and that maybe look for opportunities where we can work on proposals, projects, research grants, maybe even co-authorships of papers. And so what we're hoping to do later on is we're going to have a matchmaking exercise so that we can kind of match you to like the right kind of research topics, as well as the people that that can kind of move forward with some of the topics or areas that you'd be interested in working on. And with that, I'm going to move the mic over to Eric so that he can discuss, discuss some of the future of work topics.
Yeah, just as a little bit of background, about maybe 3 years ago, we hosted National Academy of Engineering regional meeting at Microsoft, and that's where I met Linda, who was speaking about what happens to people and their abilities to drive after they have experienced long periods of automated cruise control, dynamic cruise control. And my talk was on human-AI collaboration and designs for mixes of initiative. And we just kicked off some discussions given mutual interests, in particular around my early experiences with Tesla Autopilot. I'm an avid user of it, and I find out that I almost experiment too much. And if you want to read about some of my experiences, just search on Google or Bing my last name and Tesla, and read about my accident in Wired magazine and some comments about that, which was very unfortunate. But I think today, this is just we just put up a 6 bullets here of some topics, but this shouldn't be constraining. It should be more like framing and the starting point, just some thoughts from the organizers. You want to think about what it means to support work in mobile settings, and in advance, I'd say, if possible at all, and this is Pradhan's comment, of full automation. What does it mean to do work or to think or to even listen to email, for example, in a car, or have meetings, for example? And this brings up the topic very quickly of human cognition and the availability of cognition to do different things. And if you believe in multiple resource theory of mind, what happens when you attend to something while trying to drive and surprising situations come up, for example? It might seem quite safe, but when you look at tens of millions of miles of driving, even slight changes to the probabilities of rolling the dice leads to large-scale life-changing events and crashes and disabling accidents that affect people for life, and changing statistics of that based on designs for how audio feeds work, or people checking their device, or even looking at how to control the instrument dashboard in the car are very interesting. And it gets into, we'll hear later from Shamsi, into understanding psychology and cognitive psychology and new studies that are adapted to these situations that give us insights, and designs and the interaction of design with what we understand about human cognition. On safety risks here, I want to break this out and just highlight this, because we've all of us in this room have been horrified looking to our right and seeing somebody on the highway or on surface streets looking at a device. And then we realize that's really us, because we do the same thing. And so the situation is unbearable, yet we're all on the slippery slope, it seems. And that slope has been found per several studies to be one of the factors in the bump going up after seeing highway fatalities in the U.S. dip for a number of years, now start swinging up. What's been called out is, yes, safety is getting better with the cars and the machine itself and survivability of cars, but we're seeing an increased number of accidents, non-fatal and fatal, because of the obvious distribution of people who are looking at their device for some segment during their driving time. And so the question with this is okay, so is there something we can do about designs, short of legislating? In most places there is legislation, but short of enforcing laws about not looking at devices while traveling, what can we do if we understand the desires and goals and what people are even doing on the roads today to make it better, to reduce that upswing in safety challenges? What are directions? And gets into design and limiting what can be done and where, for example. Another comment here about this is John Crum at MSR and I, 3 years ago, IEEE published a paper where we took a large-scale data set from Minneapolis, Minnesota, of accidents by time of day and day of week and road properties and where the sun was in the air, in the sky, in the zenith and azimuth. And we basically showed how you can run a risk-sensitive planner to provide safest routes to travel on versus the shortest or the fastest. And the idea of being able to understand cognition and work possibilities and designs enough to fold that with certain kinds of roads, like taking the highway with less turns and no pedestrians for certain kinds of work, and folding these new kinds of techniques for example, safety maximization on roads with needs of cognitive needs. This is one example of that. At Microsoft, we're actually looking at this idea of car rides as productive times for meetings. And it's not just us. Large motor companies, car companies, are thinking about designing cars, even driven by somebody else, as meeting spaces. We've had some interesting reflections about the prospect of someday when you go to Outlook or Exchange and you're going somewhere, looking at pending meeting requirements, and even jumping on Satya Nadella's car ride to the airport because there's a seat there available for a meeting and you can take your own car back or be driven back. But how can we take all that time and use smart scheduling to get people together for conversations? It's one of many directions there. And then thinking about on the design side and what cars can do, how do we look at the roadmap for automation? As Don Norman said, and there could be a breakthrough in biology, so it might not be dead when we have full automation. But on the other side, it is tough. And I can tell you right now, even when I trust my Tesla the most, after some few thousands of miles, there's a major surprise, even in what I thought I knew to be relatively deterministic behavior, given road properties. Exactly. And again, back to that Wired magazine article about that. But so the question is, if we have a roadmap on automation, could we even give guidance to people developing increasingly powerful versions of automated, semi-automated driving to understand, given these kinds of needs we have and periods of time we're going to be to work, how can we do that more safely? First, as a simple example, I'd like to know if I'm doing anything in the car on autopilot or not, that I'm coming up to a safety, high-risk safety point, like pedestrian crosswalk. And I've had some near misses even there on autopilot. They just happen to be looking the wrong way and trusting my car. And the car doesn't know about people or crosswalks, but that's known by by maps. And the idea of even understanding what other people have had trouble with hotspots. And finally, what does all this mean for policies and legislation if we come up with the right set of methods? For example, it might turn out that, back to someone said they were horrified seeing some of these people in cars. On automation, maybe my car lights up and says, this car is driven by an attention deficit constrained driver, stay away. Pedestrians can see this car coming down the road near a crosswalk, a big pink light flashing. Get out of the way, because I'm not sure if this person's attending to the road. You can imagine other kinds of policies that mix with design. So I'll stop there, just a few ideas, and we'll be hearing more about this later.
Yep, thank you very much. I think I'm good. All right, so just kind of really quickly, and then we're going to get to our next speaker, which is, I'm hoping that we can create like a matrix such as this, where we put together what collaboration opportunities there are. We just made up some topics for now, but we're hoping that as the day unfolds, that we'll cement what certain topics might actually be. to basically look at ways that, we can say, like, we want to do some collaborations. We might have some data collections. We may also even have resources that are available. There might be students that may want to work at MSR. There may be some additional data or data collection opportunities. We're going to hear later about a survey that we've been collecting information on that we would love to get feedback. There may be some part-time appointments. And with that, I'm going to, great.
What do you want us to do with the notes?
Turn around. That's a great question. So Don Norman just asked what we're going to do with notes. So what we're going to do is we're going to have each individual person put it up on the white. John's going to go through. So what's going to happen is we're going to put it up there just like, what was your name? I'm sorry, I know you, but Mark. What Mark's going to do is, see what he did? Gold star, Mark. And Don, gold star. So you're just going to put it up there, and I'm glad that we have people that are initiating already. And then John's going to walk around and look at them so that he can go ahead and start moving them around. So with that, I'm going to go have Shamsi come up to give her a talk. And Eric, did you want to just do a quick introduction on Shamsi's talk? While we put up, you want to pull up your slide?
Originally, we were going to do this together because
Yes, I'm sorry.
Shamsi and I worked so closely on projects that kind of booted up our deep dive into the road simulator that led to a set of studies, and then later on with interns, and Shamsi continued for a number of years and has been working on to this day. And the basic idea is, what do we understand about results from cognitive psychology when it comes to memory, attention, judgment, the ability to do mechanical tasks in divided attention and dual task or triple task scenarios. There's been a rich literature in this space. So a starting point is going to the literature, but then we actually want to put people in simulators, design studies that specifically address various kinds of what you might think to be aspirational work tasks in cars, to understand limitations and where there might be availability that wouldn't be so threatening. I had some experiences, again, driving and visualizing, where I thought, is it possible that we know enough about the mind that when you visualize and you're thinking visually, that sucks away attention from your visual attention on the actual live scene? And it turns out that those questions framed which are deep dives, and I thought the results were surprising, and we could maybe get into them later in some of our early studies, but it really is shocking and surprising and interesting to see what really happens in the safe rooms of simulators when people are trying to do two things, either whether it be a conversation or a recall task or even more intensive tasks. And Shamsi, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Awesome. Okay, so Shamsi has 10 minutes, and I would like to see some of you start picking up some of those Post-its and start working on them. And if you need a seat, we have plenty of seats on this table too. So go ahead, Shamsi.
Okay, can people hear me? Okay, awesome, because I wasn't sure that this was working. Hi, I'm Shamsi Iqbal. I am a researcher in Microsoft Research AI. And as Eric mentioned, I have been working with Eric in this field for a while. I started as a researcher back in 2008, and Eric said that, well, we have this driving simulator, and would you like to work on some attention stuff in the car? And I said, oh yeah, that's amazing, because I worked on attention management in the desktop, and so it was just a cool way of moving domains. So yesterday when I was putting these slides together, I went back to some of the old slides that we had. And this was because I felt that we needed to start this discussion, this workshop, around the topic of safety. When I was listening to people give their one sentence desire from what they wanted to do in their car, safety was predominant. There were 6 people who said that they wanted to safely nap, but I think that everyone else said that I want to be safe in the car and do X, Y, and Z. The fact of the matter is that driving is no longer a single attention task and hasn't been a single attention task for quite a while. Even if we're not doing something in the car, there are other people in the car, we are talking to them. Many of those people in the car are actually not really attention-aware people. If you haven't encountered any of them, my kids are a good example that they have no sense of when is a good moment to interrupt when a person is driving. But there's also these devices, and these pictures are dated because I pulled this slide from 2010. But what I did update this morning, or well, yesterday, is that there hasn't been a lot of changes in terms of the legislation. And this is the June 2019 distracted driving laws. There is no cell phone use at all for novice drivers in 39 states. And this number has been the same since 2014. Because I changed the slide, I know that. No cell phone use at all for bus drivers in 20 states. We have 50, so I mean, there are 30 other states that are still falling behind. Handhelds are banned for all drivers in 19 states. I think that changed from 14 to 19 in the past 5 years. Note that it's handheld banned. You can still talk, you can still use Bluetooth. And text messaging is banned for all drivers, and that is in 48 states. That was 44, that 4 more states joined in. No state bans all use of cell phone for adult drivers when driving. Now keep that in mind. That means that legislation is allowing us to do things in the car via a cell phone, via Bluetooth. And car companies are picking up on this. If you think about the in-vehicle assistants, they're now coming into the cars. And the goal is not to make us more distracted, I hope, but it is with the desire that, well, these vehicle assistants will help you do things in the car. Now, what I haven't heard a lot is about the safety. How are they going to make you also be safe in the car? So there's some unique things about the car environment, right? And I'm going to just go through like manual, semi-autonomous, and then autonomous vehicles, because I think a lot of the things that we're going to discuss today are going to eventually apply the most in autonomous vehicles. But what we have today as the majority is the manual car. In a manual car, which is basically the cars that regular people like I drive, driving is your primary task. It's a continuous attention task. And sometimes we interleave these other non-driving tasks. It could be fiddling with your in-vehicle control. It could be talking to someone over the phone via Bluetooth. It could be talking to other passengers in the car. Now, when you have semi-autonomous vehicles, that is when the driving sometimes becomes your secondary task, because now it allows you some cycles to get involved in other things. And I'm thinking mostly about the level 3 and level 4 cars, which are mostly driving themselves. But they do require you to take over control at times. And that means that you have to be aware of the road situation. You can't be totally zoned out. And then there are autonomous vehicles, which is where the car will basically become your chauffeur-driven car, and you'll be going from point A to point B. So it is still not your office. It's still a limited attention environment. It's a moving vehicle. So even if we think about doing tasks in that environment, things like motion sickness, things like being in a clustered environment, all of that comes into play. So, which means that we have to think about designing tasks in a different way. So I'm going to quickly go over this because I have belabored on this a bit, but the reason why non-driving tasks in a car can be unsafe, because of the improper attentional distribution. People often underestimate the cognitive resources that are required when you're driving, and you're adding an additional task on top of this. Driving is a continuous attention task. You typically don't want your non-driving task to be also continuous attention, because then you're competing, and then at some point you might just deplete your cognitive resources. We also choose improper moments to engage in secondary tasks. So if you are on a busy road with lots of traffic around you, it's not a good idea to start something new, which is not driving. And also not understanding when to shift focus back. So all of these we saw as opportunities to think about how can we let drivers be more safer in the car. And in particular, keeping in mind that non-driving tasks are going to happen, a conversation, even via Bluetooth, that is going to still continue. So how can we make sure that we maintain the driving safety, but also allow people to continue or complete some of these non-driving tasks? Remember, safety is our key point here. We are just looking for opportunities where we can allow people to do these tasks without compromising safety. So we looked at the questions around when, what, and how. I'll come back to the assistance later as we go through, but as Eric mentioned, our premises here, the studies that I'm going to touch upon, are going to be all simulator studies. We're not doing anything on the road. In most cases, hands-free phone conversation is the secondary task that we were looking at in these studies. And there was only one study where it was a semi-autonomous scenario, and we looked at typing and video captioning as that. And there, the goal was to see how easily people were able to switch back to driving. Okay, so, and I probably wouldn't have enough time, but I will be happy to bring this up during the discussion section. But there were 4 studies, and the first one, which Eric had hinted at, we wanted to know when is a good time for someone to initiate or engage in a phone conversation, and also what does that conversation look like? The second one, we wanted to see that, okay, so once we have kind of like an idea about when should we even think about engaging in a secondary task, how can the car help the person who is engaged in one more task on top of driving to be alert and vigilant on the road? We also wanted to see that, okay, you're having a phone conversation, there's someone on the other end. Can we do something or share some information with the other person on the other end so that they can also help the driver be safe? And the final one is that we wanted to look at the role of audio alerts in a semi-autonomous scenario, where the audio alert can help people get out of their secondary task when the car is still in autonomous mode and then start gaining awareness about the driving scenario. So very quickly, we wanted to, let me go back because I do know that we don't have time. So how is driving performance affected by a simultaneous phone conversation? And we were looking at 3 types of conversations or 3 types of content. One was when a person is asked to give a step-by-step road direction to someone else when they're driving. The other one was they were asked to recall some information. And the third one is that they just listened to a news headline. And we also wanted to see when or what types of roads was this being impacted by. So people were driving on super simple roads, there's no other traffic there. Then they were driving on roads where there were a lot of traffic. And third is that there's something unexpected that happened on the road. So people had to be able to correct for that. So again, I'm gonna quickly drive to this. But what we found was interesting. So Eric and I had this hypothesis is that clearly the direction giving task is going to be the most difficult one because that's the most, involved one, is that you are asking someone to give me directions from your house to the grocery, and I'm driving, and so there should be conflict in what I'm doing and what I'm doing in terms of driving and what the task I'm asked to do. Turned out that people were actually breaking that task into smaller chunks. So they would say one sentence, they would pause, they would make sure they're driving properly, and they would say the second sentence, and they would just basically microtask this whole conversation. In contrast with the other task, which was recalling information, these were information like, when did you last put gas in your car, or when did you go to the grocery last? People had much more difficulty in those tasks. And what we realized that whenever you needed sustained attention for a task, that was much more difficult, rather than tasks where you can actually chunk it and break it down. So the next direction was mediation, and we wanted to see that, okay, so if we have, if a system that knows about the driving complexity during driving, can it effectively intervene? And it's basically, can the system alert the user at a point so that they can focus back on driving if they're having a phone conversation during driving. Okay, so there were 3 things that we had looked at. So we had looked at providing a very general message about, okay, pay attention. And then the other one is that there is a roadblock coming up. You need to start paying attention. The second one is that we would put the call on hold, or we would let the call continue and see how people would just basically taper off by themselves. And the timing of this intervention. So would we interrupt people right in the middle, or should we wait until they reach some kind of a break point, let them finish that sentence? And what we found is that interventions that had more explicit messages that told people exactly what to expect, so those were more effective, which makes a lot of sense. But we were worried about the load that it might put on people when they're trying to process that. This was traded off by a slowing down in the conversation. So people would actually slow down in their conversation when they would get these alerts. Not so surprisingly, drivers preferred the intervention because it directly impacted them. The callers on the other end, they really didn't have any awareness, or they didn't really care all that much, though they were drivers themselves. And it basically means that we need to educate people on the danger of driving and conversing. So I know that I don't have time, but I'm going to quickly talk about this one because the last result, where the callers don't have, really, they didn't seem to think that the intervention was useful because the call was put on hold. This is where we thought about, okay, let's share some information with the drivers, with the callers, I'm sorry, and see how they regulate the conversation. And we found that the callers actually, if you shared road sounds with the callers during the conversation, they would actually regulate the conversation, they would speak in shorter sentences, and they would take on the load of conversation on themselves more. I am going to skip this part because I know that I'm over time. I'm going to just quickly leave you with this rather dense slide. And
I think we can leave it up.
Yeah, let's leave it up. I kept it there because I thought that it would be good for the discussion if people are able to read it. But I think that we'll just stop here.
We don't mind. We're going to stop here just because I would like to get some feedback from the audience, and we will kind of.
Oh yeah, and so that is the goal.
Yeah. So please go ahead and start writing and putting up notes, and then John will walk around and try to give information. I see that Don has his hands up. So yes, we're now in the discussion phase. So I'm gonna go ahead and do discussions, and then about a minute or two before I'm gonna have you go put up your slide. But for now, go Don. Oh, microphone. We need the microphone. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Don Norman. What I'm curious about is the timing. So in the first study you talked about on the cell phone, and there's a warning, as you know, at 60 miles an hour in 1 second, you go 90 feet. So did you actually, what I'd like to see is a simulator study where some unexpected event happens. How much time does it take people to be able to start their response? Or we could do this even in where you have an expected response and you alert them, and then I still want to know how many seconds it takes them before they can actually respond. Have you done that study?
So we haven't done that study per se, but the way that we set up the alerts, so I mean, we had told people that you're going to drive in 50 miles an hour. So that's where we had constrained it, that you can't drive 100 miles. The other one is that we provided the alerts with enough time so that if they listen to it and they hit the brake pedal, they should be able to stop in time. What we saw was a lot of kind of like slamming down on the brakes because one is that it's a simulator study, so they are really not worried about really killing people, but no one also wants to kill someone in a simulator. But there was a lot of slamming down. We didn't see a lot of kind of like slowly pacing down, but one thing we did see is that people in general, they would drive below the speed limit because they knew that they were engaging in the secondary task. And so they would almost kind of like correct themselves ahead of time, and they would drive slower so that they would be able to react. But I think that's a great point about kind of like figuring out what is the safe stopping distance and all of that. But I believe there have been other studies that have looked at that.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit curious about the intervention that you described, and that was you would put the call on hold, correct? Have you noticed that people would perhaps react differently to being placed on hold, where all of their cognitive attention would go towards what just happened and completely leave the road away? Was there any adverse effect to doing this kind of intervention?
So it was interesting because we thought that the call on hold would be, I mean, one is that it is jarring. It did give you a message at the beginning, the call is being put on hold. And so this is something that both the caller and the driver could hear. So for the driver, it made a bit more sense because they were in that environment. They could see what was coming up. And so they could easily kind of like understand what the reasoning was. For the caller on the other end, they had no clue. And so they would suddenly abruptly be cut off. And then the driver would start speaking again. And so for them, it was actually not a super comfortable experience. But yes, when we didn't put the call on hold, we did find that halfway through the conversation, the driver would stop and say that, wait, I need to take care of this. And so, I mean, maybe there were better ways of smoothing people into that hold situation. But at that point, we just wanted to see that, okay, let's see what happens if we just turn off the call entirely.
And one thing before I go to the next person is, as you're thinking of the ideas that, I'm hoping that Shamsi's talk generates some ideas for maybe some other projects or other things that you can do in the driving simulator. Please write them down and post it up. Okay, there was another question on this. Yeah.
So this related to Don's comment. Away, it's switch cost, and in part, it seems like there's always the question about the environment in which they're set. So they actually are set to be preparing themselves to switch between tasks, right? And part of the challenge for actual drivers is that they don't do that, right? So they're not engaged in a phone conversation with a question in mind. Okay, I'm monitoring two tasks on an ongoing basis. So they may be in a different cognitive state with a task that is characterized that way.
I think the most relevant, and this is the study that I did skip over, is, let's see. So this was a study where we're in a semi-autonomous scenario. And so we were looking at what happens when we provide alerts to people way ahead of time. Right now, I believe Tesla gives you an alert. Eric, I'm not entirely sure how. Okay, so what we wanted to see is that let's add another alert, say like 30 seconds before. And there was literature that shows that it was about 22 seconds. And just to be on the safe side, that 30 seconds before we will start alerting you that there's something coming up on the road. And these were for all predicted things that are going to happen. This is not for situations where someone suddenly runs onto the road. So we kind of constrained us that way. But we wanted to see that we start from 30 seconds, and we tested with two different types of alerts. One was kind of like a bursty alert, where before 30 seconds, and then at 15 seconds, and then at 10 seconds, and then you get your Tesla-style alert. Then the other one was kind of like you get this increasing pulse. So it starts pinging you, or starts like this pulse at 30 seconds, and it gradually increases in its pulse rate and in its intensity. And we found that people were reacting better to the increasing frequency. And they were able to actually leave their task that they were doing at a reasonable state, because otherwise they're just dropping their phone and they're immediately switching over. Here they were able to smooth out of their task and at the same time get themselves prepared for taking over. So maybe in a semi-autonomous vehicle, it makes sense to not just have one alert, but multiple. Did that answer your question?
So if you can have, so one thing is just practically whether or not you can get the relevant information, but the other thing is just the cognitive state. One of the challenges for the drivers is that they're not in a state where they are saying, oh, okay, let me attend, see when the alert comes, then see when I got to respond. So it's a complicated thing to do in a simulator, but having them in a state which is typical of what the driver's state is, rather than one in which they are experimentally set to respond differentially to those. And that's a hard task, but it's
a hard task. And so that's one of the reasons why simulators, generalizing from simulator studies to the real world is always difficult. And of course, we have constraints around how much we can actually test out. And especially at Microsoft, I mean, we haven't been able to move beyond the simulators.
So I think for me, one of the questions is, I think we have very different driving scenarios. People going 4 hours on the motorway versus the city. And I think what we have done in research over the last years is very often not making very clear distinctions. And I think some of those automation tasks are really easy on the motorway, and you can. And I think also looking at the timings we have very often these running it 10 minutes, running it 15 minutes. And I think this is typically not giving you the problematic stages. So usually it's after, if you look at statistics, it's after hours of driving. And I think, so my question is, if we do sort of these academic exercises we publish, how much they really translate into sort of a transformation of how we really can use the car. So my question is really, should we not rather really look at what are the things which are difficult, and basically, there's a lot of handover things like this, which are tricky. And my question is, may it be more useful to think, what are the things we can automate, be it sort of the motorway with additional infrastructure, and the things we cannot automate, and not try to mix them, at least sort of for the near future.
Okay, great. I'm going to ask Andrew to go ahead and get set up for the next one. Is there any other comments?
Just to Albert's question,
okay.
as Andrew
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
So I think that's really a very, very important point. And I mean, as an interruption or attention researcher, I always worry about kind of like trying to generalize too much from simulator studies. But I think that this is a great discussion point for this group here, is thinking about how can we design these studies, or how can we move the knowledge forward if we are also, it's not viable to think that many of these things that we can do out or test out on the road. So what is kind of like, can we determine ahead of time, okay, these are the things that we are not going to be able to automate. And these are the things where we see some opportunities. And in my later talk today, we'll talk a little bit about that. But yes, I think that one of the things that I do want to make kind of like very clear is that our goal first and foremost is the driving safety. And
you said something about the duration, the sort of 4 hours, because I haven't seen much work in academia on this, that we really go to the point where really actually is happening. So
right.
We have people an hour in the lab because we can pay for this.
Mm-hmm.
We got people getting 4 hours in the lab, really sick after the 3 hours, so we don't do it.
I think it's a fair point to discuss how we can design these kinds of studies. I know for sure that there are some studies that look at mind wandering that happens when people started to get boring when they're driving. And so in those cases, if you actually strategically place some tasks, that makes people more alert. I mean, that's the reason why we listen to music or listen to news when we're driving for a long time and no one else is in the car who can keep me alert. But I think that that's also a fair discussion point because I really don't have an answer for that either.
Well, thank you, Shamsi. Thank you very much. So please put up your ideas, just some couple of things. We talked about switch costs, the switching of the costs associated with attending to the road to attending to other things. So this idea of task switching might actually generate some ideas, actually capturing the appropriate cognitive state, as well as the value of capturing information in a simulator versus the on-road. And what is the difficulty about looking at, trying to get some information on safety in that respect? And then also looking at what we can and cannot automate. So maybe that might help generate some ideas. And I bring it to my next speaker, Andrew Kuhn. So you have 10 minutes. Go ahead. Yes, you're go ahead. Use this one. Just use this one. All right.
Thank you, Linda. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about today is an overview of where we stand. I was really curious if I could figure out what the state of the art is, and we know from Eric what the state of the art is for him, and then just what exactly do we have on the roads today, and what is the outlook. So I wanted to start with this really nice figure from a paper by Stevens and his colleagues from this year's CHI, where they compare what today's travel to work and back looks like to perhaps what it might look like, say, 25 years from today if we have decent automation in place for vehicles. So what you see at the top of the figure is the distribution of time for today, right? So you have breakfast at home, then you travel to work, then you do your work 9 to 5, travel home, relax, dinner, and so forth. And what we might be able to do if we have better vehicles that allow us some automation, some freedom in the vehicles, this is the vision, right? So perhaps, I don't know, are we going to have breakfast in the car? I'm not convinced, but you might be able to eat. You might be able to do some work in the vehicle, and then both going to work and perhaps traveling back. You might be able to relax. This is going to come up later in our work as well. And I wanted to point out a couple things. Look at the travel time, for example, right? The travel time is extended because you feel so comfortable in your new vehicle that's automated that you're willing to travel further from work, right? So you're willing to move further away. Notice the fact that work has extended, right? So we have more time for work. This is, by the way, a tricky point. This came up in various conversations throughout this faculty summit. Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Is this a way that we're going to try to make work creep into people's lives more and more and more and take advantage of them? Or is this, someone said, I would like to finish my CHI paper. That's our perspective, right? Give me some more time so I can write that CHI paper. And so that's a concern. However, overall, do notice that what the vision is that the total time, including travel and work, is shorter, right? So this person in this scenario leaves at 8:30, comes back at 5:30, but leaves at 8:30 and is back having relaxed by 5 p.m., right? So even though they worked more, they actually the total time spent is less. So we can definitely discuss how exactly this works out and what exactly the distributions are, but there is some interesting hopes and interesting potentials. This is the state of the art though, right? At least from my perspective. So this is me sitting on a bus with Orit and writing a workshop proposal. And so really what I perceive to be the state of the art is that really I'm going to take my laptop and it's going to be on my lap and I'm going to work. I did find one interesting, what I think is the state of the art. So this is an Uber commercial, and maybe I can play it. Yeah, there it goes. So this is a commercial for an upper, higher end service, and this is what they're saying. Look, you can sit in the back of the car, it's going to be very comfortable, and what exactly are you going to be doing? Calling, there's going to be an iPad, a tablet, right, and a computer, and these are the things that you're going to be working on. It's comfortable, and nevertheless, that is sort of the state of the art of what we can expect to be doing. I want to say that John Lee pointed out to me that in one of these frames, there were two people sitting next to each other. It was supposed to be showing two different cars, but that's also an interesting question of, I think privacy came up in one of the comments when we went around the room. If you do travel with other people, even if it's comfortable and you're working, how does privacy play into this? And here's another promotional picture for Uber. So Martha Stewart promotes Uber, and this is the vision from Martha Stewart's perspective. And I really like this photo for a couple of different reasons. One is that it shows her doing things that you're not doing right now in the car and actually cannot do in the car. So, Martha Stewart is preparing some sort of a very fancy looking, some sweets, right? They're very fancy looking. And this is what she does anyway. She makes us feel kind of bad about how we can't do this so easily. But the truth is you were not going to do this in the car. It's going to be bouncy and bumpy and, it's not really. But again, let's think about what we could be doing in the future. That's what I think is interesting about this. There's also a printer, and that actually is starting to be something, you could sort of see something like that. So what I like about this photo is that it encourages me to think about things that we're not currently doing, not just like that commercial before where here you are on the laptop, but what other interesting things might there be that could be possible to do? And I think that's worth thinking about. And then Ort pointed out to me that Martha's looking out the window. It's probably a feature that was supposed to be artistic, but Ort's point is that a lot of us get motion sick, right? And the only way we can handle working in the car is to frequently look out the window. So again, as we think about automated vehicles, this is something that we should consider. I really like this paper too. Bastian Pfleging, who was Albrecht's PhD student, and a couple of colleagues wanted to see what people are interested in doing in automated vehicles. But the part that I'm showing here is what people currently say they are doing in automated or in manually driven vehicles. So this is 300 participants who completed a survey. And when they drive, they call and text in pretty large numbers. From the paper, I can't quite tell. I have to ask Bastian what it means to text in this context. Do they mean I'm stopped at the red light and I'm texting, or do they mean something else? Do they mean voice interfaces? But nevertheless, these are the types of tasks that they're undertaking right now. And passengers do all kinds of other things as well, including email, including whatever they call office tasks, right? So I think it's really interesting because this does capture something about what people are doing right now, and this is going to be something that we'll talk more about from our own view of this through this NSF-funded project, the Next Mobile Office. So the 5 of us, and you can talk to us about this project throughout the day. But the vision that we have is something like this. So I was just talking to Ivan about our need for the next version of HoloLens. But what if you were that driver and your car can take over for some amount of time, maybe it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is. How could we support you in doing work beyond having a laptop on your lap? And we think that as far as the human-machine interaction is concerned, augmented reality, speech interaction, and tangible interfaces might be the way to go. So I'm showing augmented reality here. This is one of Ort's students, really nice work here showing this. And then some sort of a speech interaction, right? And some tangible interface, something physical, but probably small. We don't necessarily think that a laptop is something that's all that great for this, for multiple reasons. One is that you have to look down. But the other is I'm really curious what everybody thinks about how long, these handovers are going to be interesting. Cars will eventually say, look, it's your turn. And it's actually probably going to be often, right? And the handover will have to happen. And that's probably going to be short. One major manufacturer last year was promoting a vehicle that isn't quite doing this right now, but they said, fully take your hands off the wheel. We're going to take over driving. And the time they give you to come back is 10 seconds. And I don't think you can stow your laptop in 10 seconds safely, right? So I think this is interesting to think about. And I think it's really important. We talked about safety. It's critical. This handover will happen. And then whatever is there to support your work, at the very least, has to get out of the way. And ideally, actually can support you in driving. So if you do have augmented reality, that can be something that can help with navigation, for example, or helping you with finding street signs and so forth. I wanted to quickly put up a couple of things that I think would be worth considering. These transitions, this is work with Shamsi and actually led by Christian Janssen, who was Duncan's PhD student, and his colleague Stella Dunker. And the idea here is the following. The transitions between the non-driving task and the driving task are not just simply we're doing one, and then we're doing the other, and we're coming back. But rather, there are stages. So what the stages are, we can argue about that, the details of that, right? But you will be going through some stages in terms of handing back and forth. And importantly, there's going to be interleaving, meaning that while you're doing your non-driving task and you're starting to do your driving task, you might come back to the non-driving task and go back and forth. And this is a safety concern, right? This is something that has to be designed properly so that, for example, the actual physical transfer of control doesn't happen, after suspending the non-driving task, right? So you might not have suspended the non-driving task. You might still be engaged in that non-driving task even after your driving has started. And then I have 2 more slides, Linda, so it's really quick now. I knew I was not going to run over in time because, she won't let me. One paper that I thought was really very interesting is this paper by Magnuson and Pope, and they talk about, it's a review of biomechanics and how, and working postures. And one really interesting thing about this to me was that they found drivers with lower back pain, right? And especially if the drive is long and there's lots of vibration, as well as musculoskeletal problems, neck, shoulder, arm, especially if your arms are, say, not supported. And what we're talking about, think back to that first slide, extended drives because you're so happy that your car can drive itself. But there's this concern that since you're driving longer, now you're introducing issues that could hurt you physically, right? So I think that this is one of those things that we really need to be concerned about as far as as our design. So to wrap up, today we have simple tasks, right? I think the state of the art we can argue is that for the vast majority of us, the best we can hope for is that we'll be on our laptop or some sort of a pad. And we have high hopes for tomorrow. But as we do that, as we look at that tomorrow, we should really look at motion sickness. We should look at privacy and how do we become partners in privacy, as John, I think, really nicely put it. And then safety, I think it's really interesting to look at this interleaving between tasks. And then ergonomics, we must worry about that. So.
Great, thank you, Andrew. So we're going to go ahead and go into the discussion portion. I'm going to ask our speaker to repeat the question once you hear it, and I will now open it up for comments and discussion.
Jim Pinkelman from Microsoft Research. Are you aware of research that approaches the problem by sense and the cognitive load that each of our senses require? So for instance, listening is very easy and very low cognitive, and we've been doing that for decades in the car. We've been multitasking listening. We've started to talk, and that's a little bit more of a cognitive load. Once I get into visual and touch actions in the car, are you ever aware of any research that, or is that relevant, thinking along that dimension?
I think you're hitting it right on the head. I think a lot of us have been thinking about that, and I think Shamsi, in fact, just mentioned that in her presentation as well. So as far as cognitive load, and Eric actually mentioned this as well, right? So in terms of multiple resource theory, I think a lot of us do think that this is exactly how you should look at it, and hope to tie that in.
I have to do a correction. This is not exactly how you should look at it. There's been a huge amount of research on this, and actually Alan Baddeley published a paper like a century ago in which he had people driving, and they listened to the radio station playing, and say the news broadcast, or they listened to a radio station with people playing football. This is in England, so it's soccer. And listening to the soccer game really wrecked the driving performance because it's a visual task, right? They're listening to a visual thing, so they're listening auditorily. So the point is there's a lot of literature, and it's a bit more complex than simply one sensory modality versus another.
I would like to add something to Don's point, which was interesting because when we had designed our initial study about giving the road directions, the first one that I had described, where people were trying to either recall information or give road directions. And Eric and I hypothesized that the road direction task would be much more, it would conflict much more with driving because that is also visual. I mean, at least when I give road directions to someone, I visually think about the roads. And it is complex because I believe just the fact that people are breaking it down made it somehow cognitively more manageable, where when they were trying to recall information, maybe they were also trying to visualize that when did I last take gas in my car? Well, I have to visualize that when did I last go to Costco or wherever. So I think that it is not as simple as just having the speech or listening. As soon as you start visualizing it, and as you mentioned, soccer is a visual thing to think about. I mean, Eric has examples about visualizing an airport's, what is that thing called? The display board.
Sorry, of the actual schedule screen until someone shouted stop. Because actually I was visiting Irvine, giving a talk down at Irvine, UC Irvine, and all the grad students shouted stop. I was on my way to a dinner, and it was like this visual view I had evaporated, and I could see through the windshield again. It was one of these surprises. All the professors in front of us stopped their car quickly, and it would have taken them out. So the cut Shamsi's comment, even beyond football versus, we have to be cautious, Don, because the football versus the news reports and the music is, I think, unfortunately, maybe there's some marginals there, some over, but it's too high level, need more detail. The fact that we found, and it's just one study we did, that memory tasks, recalling when you did an oil change, people would lose their track on the road and be in trouble with a memory task. We don't know what combination of visual, remembering, what it was getting in the way of their being able to navigate and be aware and sense with that in that situation. But it suggests the theory we came up with, which is in the paper, getting into the detailed structure of how cognition works when it comes to giving directions versus remembering oil changes. Wow, could you really put stuff on the stack and push and pop the stack about directions with memory when you need to attend and still remain alert? And you can't do that with this gigantic call where you're waiting for the answer to come back about the oil change. So I really want to suggest to this community of folks interested in this that it'd be great to get into the right level of detail and then to abstract from that versus start with high level.
Complete agreement. The important point is the word simply does not apply.
So I really, okay, Duncan, go ahead.
I just wanted to pick up. You're talking about basically current day activities, and you're talking about like Bastion survey. And so, one thing I can't help but notice. So UCL, the office is in central London, but we live like 50 miles away towards Cambridge, and so commuting on a train going into the office, and just you can't help but notice, like when you get onto a busy commuter train, just the patterns of people's natural behavior, right? And I think one of these things is to start understanding the way people work and want to work. And so picking up on like what we saw with Gloria Mark's work on the opening day on Wednesday, the types of work that people do when, it's very clear. In the morning, people are getting their head down and doing focused work. There's a lot of activity. You can hear it with the fingers tapping. People are preparing slides, writing emails. In the evening, coming home, there's no work. There are no laptops out. If there is a laptop out, it's somebody watching a movie or playing a game on their phone. There's very little activities. It's kind of funny just to understand. I think one of the things understanding more about the types of activities people are doing when, how that fits into their daily schedule is super important.
So I'm getting kicked off, but I totally agree. And one thing that we're going to hear soon about is what is it that people would like to do? And I think that goes along with, and then I think it's really important what everybody's saying, right, including Eric, is what is it that tech can provide? And I think that there's this push and pull of, let's not design things that people don't want, but also let's kind of inform people's desires with what is possible. And that includes, cognition as well as the tech that provides that human-computer interaction. And totally agree. Yeah.
So maybe one last question or last comment.
Okay, so my last question about privacy. So you mentioned about the share rider about privacy, but also wondering what do you think about the privacy when self-driving cars are collecting all the different kinds of sensor data because it might be a privacy violation, not just for the driver, the passenger, but also for the other cars and the pedestrians.
I think this is a really complex question, and I don't know, perhaps at some point John might be a better person to answer that, but yeah, I'm aware of the fact that it's a complex question, and that's the extent of my, but I don't know if you wanted to.
I'll talk more this afternoon. One quick thing though, just to remind people who have had these great comments that were just shared, write them down and post them up.
Yes, thank you. I was just going to remind people to do the same thing. So just like a couple of comments that I've heard, I just want to summarize real quickly. Privacy issues were something that we didn't talk about earlier, but it'd be great to, maybe capture some of that. The user interface and what type of, system and how it should look is actually really important. And then what are people actually really interested in doing? And then maybe actually looking at some of the micro levels and trying to understand some of the details of things that people actually want to do in their cars. And then taking a look at that in the context of the large picture.
Sorry about that. There's a wire right here.
Okay, so it is my pleasure to introduce our next speakers, which is Orit and Rafaela, and I'm going to take over. Oh, just a second. Let's clap for Andrew first. Thank you, Andrew. Okay, go ahead, Orit.
Can you hear me? Is it on?
Is it on?
Can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you. This is great to join the discussion now that we're starting to think about attention and productivity with concrete findings from a preliminary study of what people want to do in the car and what people hope to do in the car. So this is work that I'm conducting as part of the NSF-funded research together with our team. I will present this together with Rafaela Sadoun. Rafaela is joining us online. Rafaela?
Yes, hi everybody.
Great, I'm a professor of computer science at Wellesley, and this is a very interdisciplinary perspective of our work. So I'm going to start. It's not going to work. Okay, so I'm going to start by thinking about our methodology. So one of the goals for NSF-funded research is to identify the needs of commuting workers and managers. And we have three different stages for, not necessarily linear, for our methodology. The first one is to study existing data. Specifically, we're looking into the American Time Use Survey. Rafaela and her team, John and his team are analyzing this data and looking for trends that relate to commuting with workers and managers. We're conducting a new large-scale time usage well-being study in order to understand what users are currently doing, drivers are currently doing in the car, and what they're hoping to do in the car. And we're planning to follow up with a series of in-depth ethnographic studies. Today, our focus will be on the large-scale study and the preliminary findings from this study. So here we see a snippet from. That's not good. Ed? Okay, so here we see a snippet from our study. This is a new survey that we designed that is based on the executive time usage study that Rafaela and her team have been using on an international group of executives. What we ask our participants to do, we ask them to enter a full agenda of a representative workday, and we ask them to enter all of their activities from the time that they wake up to the time that they go to sleep that last more than 15 minutes. So the granularity that we get is activities, personal activities, work activities, some qualitative data, and we modify this questionnaire to give us more granularity around commuting. Specifically, we're interested in multitasking in commuting, what non-driving task users are currently doing, what non-driving task users are interested in doing. We also added some questions to this study in order to kind of measure the appeal of different alternatives to commuting. So what will people do if they don't have to commute? What will people do if they commute in a self-driving car? And we looked at morning versus evening commute separately. So we deployed this preliminary, and these are the results that I'll present today with a mechanical Turk sample. So this is a sample of 220 people, 40% female. We got a variety of backgrounds. we had 148 people that reported to be commuters. Out of these commuters, 126 reported to be driving themselves during the commute. And for these commuters, the mean commute time was 60 minutes daily. So this is the sample that we're working with. Rafael, are you back? Not sure. Okay. And Rafaela, are you back? Rafaela, are you online? This will be a good time to get her. Okay.
We'll get Rafaela back momentarily.
Okay, so I'll just kind of keep going. So looking at the general time share of activity throughout the day, we see that commuting is just under 8% for this sample. Not surprisingly, we see that commuting activities are concentrated in the morning and in the afternoon, and that they're interleaving together with personal and with work activities. We did find that more commuting is associated with less time spent in personal activities, and that shows us that commuting is really substituting for personal time, and that 45% among our commuters. Rafaela, are you back? Rafaela?
Yes, I am back.
Yay,
I am back.
just in time. Okay, so I'm just saying that 45% of our commuters associate commuting with negative feelings and specifically with tiredness and stress. So with this general overview, as I mentioned, what we were really interested, especially within the context of the last 2 days' discussion on productivity, is what people are currently doing in the car. And when we ask what people are currently doing in the car, we talk beyond driving. So what are the non-driving things that people are currently doing, and what are the non-driving tasks that commuters will be interested or desire to do in a self-driving car? So I'll ask Rafaela to take us through our finding. What do people do while commuting?
Yeah, and in light of what Orit just said, it's not surprising that a lot of what people do while commuting relates to their personal time. And this is in a sense telling us that commuting is a way through which people take back that personal time that is lost going or coming back from work. What is really interesting, and what I think we are trying to get at with this data, is that there are strong differences between managers and non-managers, which suggests that in part what you do while you are commuting depends on your socioeconomic status. It depends on your type of job. For example, managers might be more interested or more needing to do interactive work, which can be done in a car. Now, the second benefit, going to the type of activities that people do while commuting, this time use survey, one of the second benefit that it provides is that it allows you to go deep into the secondary activities. And here I would say it's not surprising. It's nevertheless very scary to see that a lot of the secondary activities, secondary activities that are happening inside the car are things that are probably not very safe at the moment. For example, reading emails or replying to emails, which are, in the words of the speaker before us, active types of tasks. There is also a fair amount of passive, cognitively perhaps less demanding thinking and reflecting, which don't require so much multitasking.
Rafaela, just for this audience, I would like to point out, even though these are the things that we found less, but people are programming and analyzing data in the car.
Yeah, that's right.
And you don't see some of the audience, but some of the audience is kind of shaking their hand in disbelief.
Yeah, that's right. Well, they were incredibly honest with us in saying these things, but I'm gonna make sure that I'm not in their city when I travel.
Yes.
One of the things that we really are trying to push with this line of research is to try and think about the experience in commuting as part of the whole working activity. And so this is one, going to what people do right after and before the commute, or the differences between morning and evening. I'm not going to go in detail in this, but the answer is we do find that there are different patterns of activities, as you would expect. And I think it's important to understand how commuting fits with the rest of the day, and also thinking about what people can shift in an autonomous vehicle when the technology is ready. So, for example, much more thinking, replying to emails in the morning, much less of that in the activity just before commuting.
Rafaela, just 1 second. I'll jump to this slide. I was just showing the general graph that shows that if people can drive a self-driving vehicle, then we see that their interest in working is increasing compared to the current commute. So they still they're still mostly interested in doing personal stuff while in the car, but they have an increasing interest both for workers and for managers to do work in a self-driving car. And now I'm moving to this slide with the specific differences that you can describe.
Yeah, and I think this is another of these sort of scary slides in the sense that, you know, you ask people what they want to do and they answer to you they just want to do more emails. And so it's, I think this is, you know, and less thinking and reflecting, if you notice on the right. So this, I think, poses some interesting questions for the technology development. And in the sense that, you know, one question that we have as a team is, for example, whether new technologies should try to preserve personal time or increase work, whether there are ways for the technology to support the transition from and to personal time, and also within working activities, whether we should try and increase the efficiency of what people are currently doing and demanding to do, for example, emails, or if there is really an opportunity to develop technologies that can help protect more thinking and reflecting.
Right.
And just to say that we are thinking of this in terms of also collecting more data and finding ways to, you know, we really think it will be important to explore these questions in larger samples of knowledge workers to really pin down the type of correlations that we are finding here. And I'll pass it on to Orit, who will discuss the specific aspects of technology.
Right, so kind of specifically we're interested in gathering more data, and as Rafaela implied, we think that what you do for work, the social economic status does matter in terms of what you want to do in the car. So specifically we would like to focus on knowledge workers, which bring us here to Microsoft. We hope to collect more data with a large sample of people that are driving the car, people that perhaps are driven, for example, people that commute with Uber on a regular basis, people that drive in cars that have strong automation features like Tesla, and people that use something like the Microsoft shuttle. So different modes of transportations for knowledge workers. In terms of technology design, I want to show a quick video. I know that someone wants to help me with the video. A quick video of some of the ideation that we're doing in our lab. This is ideation that follow up the nice sketch that Andrew was showing, thinking how can we take the task that people want to do, the task that people are currently doing, and design for simulator kind of environment brainstorming of how this could be done. So here we're exploring different modalities of interactions. So what if we let them kind of rehearse presentations, and what will gesture interaction in the car, free hands will look like, what would it look like with a little controller, combination of tangible inputs together with voice, right? And how the transitions would look like when you have to now put your little tangibles aside and kind of go back to driving, how the kind of windshield, which we assume will have augmented reality capabilities, will clear up to support the driving task, but at the same time will allow you to wrap up on what you were doing, because we don't want users to kind of have this lingering effect of still being focused on their work. Not sure why it's
Thank you very much.
again.
I'm going to just cut this just a little bit short. I want to make sure that
We're done.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we have time for Satish and also for a break.
Sure.
So I'm just going to open up for just like maybe like 6 minutes of questions or discussions. Yes, Duncan?
Hi. So just picking up on this, focusing on the commuting, and just the contrary point is just get rid of commuting, right? So I was at a session conference last week, and someone was reviewing work on productivity, and the research is there showing that people, well, what you're saying here is that people don't like commuting, right? It makes them feel miserable and stressed.
Yep.
And on the flip side, when you look at productivity, people who work from home have higher productivity gains. some of what's driving that is self-selection bias. People who are more motivated and focused can work better at home. But it's kind of an interesting idea that, as we move in, and some of the topics that have been discussed over this past couple of days has been around the kind of the opportunities for the global workforce, particularly around knowledge work, to kind of dial in and do remote work more. It's just an alternative. So we're like focusing at the moment on making the commute better, but instead, do we still need the commute when so much work is done through an internet connection on a screen?
It's actually an interesting kind of meta comment as related to our first deployment of the study, because our first deployment of the study was with Mechanical Turk users, who are people that at least part of the time work from home on what they consider to be Mechanical Turk home. Still, the majority of these people were commuting to some sort of work. So even though they were freelancing, they still had a place to commute to and come back from on a regular basis. But I think that's an interesting point to consider.
I think that's the reason why the focus on managers is interesting to us, because to some extent for managers, interpersonal interactions will always be needed. And so I think you're right, and I'm very familiar with the study on commuting and working from home. For some professions, maybe commuting won't be needed, but my impression is that for managers, perhaps there will never be a moment of a total elimination of going to work and showing your face and seeing what people think.
Don?
I think the studies that you're doing are really important, but it's actually again quite complex. We've been doing studies similar, and we've ended up with a 3x3 matrix, and even that's an oversimplification, because first of all, the kind of vehicle matters. So we've been looking at, in theory, completely driverless vehicles, no driver, and therefore we can configure the interior space, and we asked people to configure it for what activity you'd like to do. And if you put people in a bus, that restricts the kinds of activities they can do. And an automobile with the standard parallel seats also restricts. But we've discovered that there's a difference between short trips, which might include commuting, medium length trips, which might be an hour or more, which for some is commuting, but
right.
And long trips, which might be driving from San Diego to San Francisco, 10 hours or so. And then it depends whether you're driving, whether you're alone, or whether you're with a group, but there are two kinds of groups. One is a group of strangers, and the other is a group of friends. And so we discover the activities vary a lot depending upon that. And on the long trips, there was never a single activity. I need to work for the first few hours, but then I want to relax, I want to watch a movie, I want to, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's actually a really fascinating topic, and I think it's going to make a really big difference as we move forward.
Yeah, so thank you. Yes, we are thinking of this complexity. There is a lot of data that we collected and are analyzing and didn't share it in the last 10 minutes of presentation. Some of it has to do with the fact that, yes, you're traveling with people, and we're inquiring who are the people that you're traveling with in the car. Our focus is on the work context rather than the travel to San Diego to LA or San Diego to San Francisco context. We ask people explicitly to think about a representative work day. That was the context of our study. I agree that it's important to study all these different conditions. I also want to mention something about the study that Andrew showed before. It's also important to study them in different contexts. So the study that Andrew showed of Bastian's work was made mostly in Germany. We're currently planning perhaps multicultural perspective. We would like to study this in Germany, in the UK, in the US, perhaps with managers in China. So culture is also one important condition, work culture as well as other aspects.
Yes, so I'm going to just give you 1 second because that's going to be the last comment. But I just want to say, so this survey that Orit and Raphael is talking about, we're actually very open to sharing it because we would like to get as many users to participate in it and be able to look at these cultural differences as well as even just geographical differences.
Okay, so I remember when Jiang Li come to our institute to give us talk, one of the things he talked about is eye off the road is really dangerous. And I have seen two speakers talking about the AR, the augmented reality. Actually, some people may believe that once you're looking two views, you're not doing the eye off the road. But I know that this augmented reality idea concept has been tried decades ago. They tried it on a pilot and didn't work. And a number of the vision research have been showing that when you have two views together, you not necessarily see both. There's a lot of change blindness or inattentional blindness happen. So that means if you simply present the two views, they may still don't see many things on the road.
Yeah.
So it's very important that you thinking about in terms of the human interface, how you're going to present those information so that they're not going to miss one of the views.
I agree. I just want to mention, I fully agree, but I just want to mention that we already have augmented reality in the car. If you drive in a car that has kind of a heads-out display, you have augmented reality on your windshield. So this is happening, and we need to make sure that this is happening safely for supporting other tasks beyond driving. We also have to develop, and in our lab together with Andrew and his students, we're working on that. We also have to develop the technologies to study what we're doing and to make sure that we understand where people are looking at when using augmented reality for different tasks.
And it's also, I totally agree. And it's also worth mentioning that it's ideally truly augmenting reality, so it shouldn't be two views while you're driving, right? It's not just a simple display that you have to look to. And in addition, hopefully it's actually the work part, and then you're totally right. You have to turn it off, right? If you
I'm very, very sorry, but we're gonna, because we're really getting close to break
Ella,
time.
thank you
But we're gonna
for
have
joining
lots of
us
opportunity
virtually.
to talk, and I want to make sure I really give Satish an opportunity
And we're
to
moving to
basically
the
give
new
his talk.
presentation.
So let's thank Orit thank you very much, Orit. Satish?
Thank you.
And go ahead and
Thank
take
you,
it
Linda.
away.
Mic's on?
Yes, is it?
Yes, I think so. Good morning again, everybody, and thanks, Linda, for this opportunity. I'm Satish. I'm from Microsoft Research India. We have a lab in Bangalore, which is in the southern part of India. And today I'm going to talk about one of our ongoing projects in the lab called HAMS, and I'll come to what HAMS stands for in a second. This is joint work with my colleagues Akshay and Venkat, who are researchers at Microsoft India, and a bunch of very smart research fellows and interns who we have working on the project. So the motivation for HAMS was basically, and I don't know how many of you have come to India or have experienced how it is to drive on roads in India, but if you have, you quickly realize that that there is a serious problem that we face in that part of the world. India has probably among the highest rate of fatalities in terms of road accidents. So road safety is a really critical issue, and that kind of became the starting point for HAMS. And when we looked at road safety, again, given the conditions that exist in our part of the world, I'm pretty sure, like him, I'm also going to be dead by the time driverless cars become a reality in India. But, so when we looked at, road safety, we kind of started focusing on looking at doing things which could potentially improve road driving practices by focusing on driver and driving behavior. And that really led, to HAMS being born. So HAMS really stands for, oops, this should work, right?
I'll be your clicker. It moves. Oh. It moves. Here. Oh.
Murphy's Law. Yes. Yeah, that's the one.
Okay, so what side do you want?
Second one.
Okay, let's try this one more time.
Right. So HAMS essentially stands for Harnessing Automobiles for Safety, and the core idea there was to use technology in a way that could be easily integrated with existing vehicle populations in India, and use techniques which could then look at monitoring driver behavior in a useful way, right? So when we looked at easy retrofitting in existing vehicles, the most obvious device that obviously came to light was a smartphone, because everybody obviously carries a smartphone. So the core idea behind HAMS is to use camera-based sensors which are available in off-the-cuff smartphones, off-the-shelf smartphones, and use that as a device within the vehicle, fitted within the vehicle, and to monitor driver behavior, which can lead to hopefully more responsible ways of driving and improving overall driving practices in India, right? We also have developed via HAMS techniques, which could, because this involves a lot of video processing, HAMS also allows for edge processing, so we don't ship all the video that's recorded by the camera sensor in the vehicle back to the cloud. We basically generate incidents so that only relevant video snippets which are relevant to the specific incidents where something needs to be alerted or supervised can be processed and sent back back to whoever is looking at that data. So we don't need to really use expensive cloud connectivity kind of scenarios, because in India it's also a reality that many places don't have connectivity. And so it's important that we don't take for granted that you're going to be able to ship a lot of video back to cloud for efficient processing, right? We started out with a pilot that we started in our own office premises in MSR India. We had the shuttle just like you have here, which ferry employees back and forth from their homes to offices. So we started out HAMS by fitting some of these vehicles with these smartphone-based camera sensors, and we've recorded about 25,000 per kilometer. That's about 15,000 miles of data through this project. And as we speak now, we are actually also undertaking a pilot project in partnership with the Government of India, and I'll talk about that more in the following slides. Right. So this is essentially what HAMS does. So as you can probably imagine, the smartphone is fitted inside the vehicle, and it has two cameras operating. So we operate both cameras at the same time. So the front camera of the smartphone essentially looks into the car and monitors driver state. The back camera, which is on the back of the smartphone, looks out of the car and looks at what's the driving environment. And of course, using other inputs like the GPS and the other sensors which are available, we are able to triangulate and get inputs to get a sense of driving context, and within that context, look at driver behavior and hopefully have interventions which can make better driving practices. So these are some of the detectors that we've built within HAMS. We've looked at distracted driving, and in India it's a very common problem. Although states do disallow cell phone use while driving, it's fairly common to have people talking on cell phones. So we built detectors which can actually detect cell phone usage while driving. We built detectors that can look at fatigue indicators such as yawning and eye blinking. And we've also built detectors which can look at gaze tracking. So does the driver, and this is again extremely common in India, culturally people do not have a culture of really being safe while approaching intersections and things like that. Are they looking at mirrors before they're supposed to take a left or right turn? Those are also things that we want to kind of look at using HAMS. This is the driving context, which is done by the camera, which is on the back of the phone looking out, and using inputs from the onboard diagnostic device, which are retrofitted into the cars. We can look at things like speed and acceleration data and triangulate that with the environment outside. So look at things like ranging and tailgating using positional kind of data that we get from the outside environment, and also provide inputs via HAMS in terms of safe driving practices, right? So with that kind of context setting, when we looked at scenarios in which we could apply HAMS, a few of them kind of came to light. We could look at driver training. In India, there are these driving schools which train the likes of the Ubers, and Ola, which is the Lyft equivalent in India. These drivers go to these driving schools and get certified, and using that certification, they're able to basically get job opportunities with companies like Uber. So that's one application that obviously stood out for HAMS. We also got a lot of interest from companies, trucking companies, as well as ride-sharing companies in terms of fleet monitoring, because they were interested in making sure that they get their drivers to drive safely, and therefore, obviously, there was interest in HAMS, and we're having a couple of conversations with some of these companies on that. But really, the scenario that we've now focused on to start with is what is called as license testing, driver license testing. This is a project that we're doing with the Government of India and the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. So this really involves monitoring the driver as he or she is taking a driving test, right? So this is the equivalent of the DMV as it's, I think, known in the US. So people go to this entity called RTO and they take a driving test. And today, the situation in India, on license testing is completely broken. There are statistics. Again, I don't know how many of you in India, but the manual process that is used in the driver testing scenario is prone, it's slow and tedious, of course, it's prone to corruption and other such issues. And there are data points, which are as shocking as something like this, that, more than half the people in India apparently, have got driver's licenses even without taking a test. And there are multiple reasons for the scenario, because the system is completely non-technology driven and it's processed. So there is an opportunity that we see where we can bring automation via a kind of HAMS-based intervention to make the driver testing process transparent, efficient, and obviously more productive, overall. So that's the core right now effort with HAMS. So what we aim to achieve with automated driver license testing, in this case, what we do is basically we don't have someone physically monitoring the driver as a person, but we have the smartphone, and using HAMS inside the smartphone in the vehicle, we look at a scenario where we can both increase the coverage of the driving test parameters, we can obviously reduce cost, and most importantly, make the whole process of issuing a driver license clean and corruption-free, which is a huge issue in India. This is what HAMS does. So when a person wants to take a driving test, the smartphone is fitted inside the car, and using very minimal track instrumentation, which is that's a typical driving test that a person takes in the DMV equivalent there, and using very minimal instrumentation, we can basically retrofit this technology into that environment and make sure that we bring about improvements and productivity increases in the driving test scenarios in India, right? So what we also achieve through HAMS is that currently this is a sample of the parameters that are tested, and I know it's an eye chart, but there are about 20 parameters that are supposed to be tested in each driving test before issuing someone a driver's license. And what currently happens is, although that includes things like mirror scanning and things like that, for today someone sitting next to the driver inside the car, it's impossible for that person to look at whether the person scanned the mirror before he or she took a left or right turn. So even with someone present today, the current system is unable to actually do a good job of the parameters that are supposed to be tested as part of the driving license test. But with HAMS and with the detectors that we are hopefully bringing into the play, we can actually increase the overall efficiency of the system by because of doing things like gaze tracking, etc. So it makes for obviously simple and low cost processes, but also increased coverage and well tested and safe drivers who will hopefully promote better driving practices on the road, right? So this is a simple video. I mean, this is a simulation that we did as we did our testing of what really HAMS does, and it will give you probably an idea of what we are trying to achieve in this scenario. Hopefully, can play the video. Yes.
The HAMS app detects the driver entering the vehicle and identifies the driver. It also detects that the driver
So there's a voiceover, but I can quickly, so as the person gets into the car, the smartphone basically identifies the face and make sure that the person who's taking the test is actually the person. Because in India, there's also a lot of issues where people, someone fills out the form for a driving license and someone else takes the test. So there are also kind of issues. So this solves that kind of stuff.
showing whether the driver is looking straight or at the left or right mirrors.
So the left screen basically detects the outside environment, and the right screen detects what's happening on the driver's state.
We also show a score at the bottom right, which is updated each time a violation is detected. The driver is approaching a left turn. He looks straight while performing the turn, without scanning the mirrors as he should have. HAMS detects that the driver is rapidly approaching a vehicle directly in front. That is, there is an obstacle. The driver approached the obstacle at a high speed and then braked sharply. He then shifted lanes to the right without scanning the mirrors. HAMS detects various tagged locations along the track. In this case, it detects a pedestrian crossing. Here, the driver brakes abruptly and scans the scene, but only to his left before proceeding.
So in the interest of time, I won't play the whole video, but you get a general idea, I hope. And this is how basically it is. Yeah, yeah, that's an obvious one. Yeah. So this is what we're doing right now. And as we speak, as I said, we're doing this pilot with one of the states in India, in the northern part of India called Uttarakhand, and the RTO there, which is the equivalent of the DMV, is now actually testing hams to be deployed, at that facility. And we are pretty hopeful that in about a month's time, mid-August time, we'll actually have a ham-based solution actually issuing out automated driver licenses in India very soon. So we hope to kind of have a progress there. And we're also working with other government entities. There is an organization called CIRT, which is the Central Institute of Road Transport, which does technology recommendations for various DMV equivalents in India to adopt technology. So we are working with them to validate hams as part of their recommendations. So hopefully we are hopeful that in the coming months and years we will have automated driver license testing in India becoming a reality, which will hopefully promote safer driving practices and hopefully less fatalities caused because of road accidents. Thank you.
Satish, thank you. Given that it's 10:45 and we actually have to get notes, I'm going to change this around a little bit. I'm going to apologize to Satish that we're going to wait for questions until afterwards. What I'd like the group to do right before they go out to get coffee right now is to everybody right now take a sheet of paper, because I noticed that not everybody's writing something down. Take a sheet of paper, write something down, and plaster it up there, and then go get coffee while we look at.
One question though.
We really.
Half a question. So, Satish,
I can give half an answer.
So Eric mentioned this too, right? The idea that you have, how do we affect policy? So how did you do it? Because it's not simply developing the software, it's getting someone to accept it to make it an official thing.
Yeah, so one of the things that we started doing was we worked with one of the largest car companies in India on this because they showed interest. And it so happens that, that company has a joint venture with the government of India, for setting up a driver training research institute which promotes safe driving practices. So we started out with that pilot, and through that we got connected to the Ministry of Road Transport, and we met the minister in charge of this, and he was pretty excited about the whole thing. And he said, let's do a pilot, and then see whether it works. And that's how things got moved. Yeah. So yeah, I agree with you. It's a tough job to sell this to.
Let's give Satish a round of applause.